Hey everyone, it's me again. I know this is going to be a little different. I know I say that with each video I make. This one's going way off my normal fare of power stations and EVs, but this is something that's kind of been on my mind and heart for at least the last few months. And maybe it's out there and I'm just not aware of it, but this isn't something I've really heard anyone or any organization really address in a really compelling way that I'm aware of. If you are aware of other videos or conferences or whatever where they address this in a meaningful way, please share it in the comments. But big picture, we've heard a lot about AI lately, and a lot of that's just kind of hype and investment community kind of buzz about it, and technology enthusiasts just getting really enthusiastic about it. But I I I feel what's coming is going to come faster than a lot of people expect, and that there's going to be potentially fairly large scale societal disruption from AI, um, specifically in the labor and job market, and kind of the domino effect of that, and the various other kind of societal issues that brings up that I don't think we're really addressing or dealing with in a really meaningful way right now. Depending on who you listen to, I mean, there are some people that say, "Oh, it's only 5 years away, 10 years away." Realistically, I think it's. I mean, again, to be clear, I'm not a technologist. I'm not a programmer. I'm not an AI expert. I'm not a pastor. I'm not a theologian. Again, opinions expressed are solely my own, for what that's worth. Um, uh, I think it's potentially going to have a huge disruptive impact on society, in terms of work, labor, economics, how that's going to be managed, and just a lot of other knock-on effects from that. Um, I think we're going to see, we're already seeing, I think, work displacement from AI doing kind of programmatic jobs. I think you're going to see that accelerate. Um, I think once humanoid robots like the Tesla Optimus bot and similar robots of that type really start to scale up, which depending on who you listen to is between maybe 3 to 5 years away before that scale starts to become meaningful. Um, may replace a lot of kind of more manual labor type tasks. Again, there's a lot of unknowns with that in terms of how quickly they'll learn, how fine their motor skills and repeatability without error is. The economics of the energy servicing, uptime, all that, a lot of unknowns. But I think there's certainly a lot of interest out there to see how they'll perform with those tasks, and potentially, if they're really good, they're reliable, low cost, or rather not necessarily low cost but high ROI. I see the potential for them replacing a lot of the labor market. So again, we're talking a little further out, but massive disruption of the labor and workforce through automation, AI, whether that's computational or labor or whatever. And what I want to get to is, I think this is kind of a really important moment for the faith community to kind of have a conversation about this and kind of think about how they're going to address it. And like I said, I have not heard anything specifically on the lines of what I'm about to talk about. Specifically, I did see a workshop by Dr. Johann Leah Biola, um, who is heading up kind of their AI initiative at that school. If you don't know, Biola is a conservative evangelical college in Southern California, and they take their commitment to scripture and scriptural fidelity very seriously. And I think he, in the presentation he made, he's really encouraging the evangelical community to kind of lean into technology, not to retreat from it, not to see it as some kind of scary boogeyman that's so he's I think it's encouraging that he sees the faith community's role in it from that standpoint, but he didn't really address what I get to, which is the faith community's larger response to the larger scale effects of AI, which I believe will be workplace and labor displacement. So essentially, widespread unemployment. Now, I'll come full circle on that because I know that sounds like incredibly dystopian and just like this, rise in the machines and just, widespread, squalor and poverty. Could that happen? Yes. I don't think it necessarily has to, but I think what's coming could be a huge opportunity for faith communities to help give meaning and context to people's lives. I think maybe more so than, and maybe more than a century even, because I think what I've seen, again, just as, I self-identify as an evangelical Christian. Again, I'm not trying to virtue signal about that or put myself above anyone else. I'm just making that as a statement. But what I've witnessed, I'm going to say over the past 80 years or so, give or take, is you kind of, post World War II, you saw kind of this expansion of the evangelical community. And I'm just using that. This could also apply to, Buddhist, Jewish, Muslim, whatever. But I'm just using that because it's the model and context I'm most familiar with. Is you had a large expansion of evangelical churches in the 50s in suburban areas. Whether that's more more kind of evangelistic traditions like the Baptists and the Methodists, or more mainline traditions like the Presbyterians or the Lutherans, even though in their day they were very evangelical too, but that's kind of beside the point. And there was this general kind of cultural norm of going to church, and that was a respectable thing to do. And a lot of these churches in their heyday had hundreds, if not thousands, of members. And there still are definitely mega churches that have memberships of that size, but a lot of these churches that were formerly had, very large memberships have now dwindled down to, 180, sometimes in some cases, 20, 25, 30 congregants, and they're really struggling to really, keep the doors open, to be perfectly honest. And I think post, I would say kind of going ahead a few more decades to like the early 80s, you had the Reagan administration, you kind of had this American optimism, and that I do think you had a wave of people kind of going back to church. But at the same time, I think in parallel to that, you had the rise of technology in various forms, whether it was personal electronics, appliances, the early personal computers, just general gadgets. You saw the early iterations of the mobile phone, and just kind of people maybe this kind of a blunt or imperfect kind of metaphor, but I think basically, technology kind of replaced religion. I wouldn't say as meaning, but it's like, um, I don't know. I just feel technology kind of took over, and people kind of pushed aside um, the role of faith in their lives as kind of a really defining characteristic. For, not for everyone, but for a lot of people. Um, and with the advent of the internet, where virtual community in some place kind of displaced physical community for a lot of people, and just this kind of this generalized kind of techno optimism, where people just put a lot of faith and belief in modern conveniences um, and methods of doing things, and kind of moved away from more traditional faith communities. But I kind of see that coming full circle, and that going forward, I think you are going to see a lot more labor displacement. So basically, you're going to have, potentially millions of people without jobs, and people that, for a lot of their lives, their lives and their identity was kind of wrapped up in their professional context, and basically in their jobs. That's where their identity was based. You're going to have a lot of people struggling, economically, mentally, in a lot of other ways, just kind of wondering what their place in the world is, and it, kind of existential kind of meaning of life issues. So I think this is a huge potential opportunity for communities of faith to kind of, lean into that and meet people in their time of need, whether it's through economic assistance, just, counseling and fellowship, coming together, supporting them, even collective support of resources, kind of much like the early church, for, candidly, the haves and the have-nots. I think these are big. I think these are big issues and big topics that I think should be addressed, and kind of the church or communities of faith need to get ahead of and anticipate, rather than being reactionary. So I want to be optimistic, but I'm just afraid that this is going to come, once it reaches that tipping point, it's going to come very quickly, and a lot of people, governments, organizations, so forth, are going to be caught off guard, and this is going to be very disruptive to their organizational and societal model. So I've heard a lot of different kind of hypothetical approaches to how, of basically a post work economy, how that would work. I've heard, ideas about basically taxing the labor of robots and having that be the basis of a universal basic income. And I know, I consider myself a capitalist by and large. So, for a lot of people, that kind of smacks of kind of this socialism or communism, if you will. But I really think this is something that needs to be talked about, because, the choice is either, you're going to have this, you're already seeing it. And especially where I live in Northern California, kind of the haves and have-nots, because the cost of living is so out of control, here, that you basically have kind of a service class of, like, and again, I no disrespect to these professions, but like the baristas, the delivery drivers, the Uber drivers, and then you have these, 6-figure, white collar and executive jobs, and the middle class has kind of been hollowed out in some respects. But if you're basically taking away a lot of those jobs, what either you're going to have massive societal unrest for the economic displacement, or you provide them kind of a basic sustenance somehow. Um, Kind of half jokingly, maybe some of you've heard this term, and this is kind of a sci-fi kind of social media kind of construct of it. They call it luxury space communism. It's kind of this somewhat of this idealistic view of the future of like a post-work society. Um, so, I guess techno-optimists see this as kind of like a utopian future where people are free to pursue what they want kind of at their leisure without the economic imperative of you have to get up, you know, 2 hour commute, 8 to 5, then do it all over again, day after day after day. I lived through that myself for a while. It wasn't fun, so I definitely sympathize with those that have to do that. And I think that possibility exists, but it has to be addressed structurally and from a regulatory standpoint, a political standpoint, to kind of put those constructs in place to manage that. I think if you were to just kind of be more reactive, kind of after the fact, it's going to be very chaotic, and it's going to displace a lot of people, I feel. So again, I think this is Faith Community's moment to be proactive, to be ahead of that, to provide kind of sense of community, the sense of meaning to people when they're going through these huge life disruptions. And I haven't heard anything yet. That's not to say it's not out there. There haven't been conferences that have addressed that. Again, if you know of any, please let me know. Please put in the comments. I'm very, very curious about this. Taking a little more of a dystopian view, it could, highly exacerbate the gap between have and have-nots, where the already wealthy or moderately wealthy will become extremely wealthy, and the poor will become extremely poor, and kind of this permanent underclass. Again, I think this needs to be addressed structurally, kind of ahead of the curve, so this doesn't become a massive kind of societal, apocalyptic event. And I don't know. Frankly, I don't know what's coming. This may turn out completely different than a lot of people are hypothesizing, but I do see the change coming at a faster and faster pace, that basically is fundamentally disrupting the current economic model. And I'm not aware of a lot of policymakers, philanthropic organizations, et cetera, really taking a very proactive, strategic approach to this to try to address it ahead of when this actually happens. So I don't know. I still don't know exactly what I feel and think about it, but I see it coming. I have my investments, for what it's worth. I'm kind of planning as best I can for a contingency that my job may be displaced at some point. I mean, I don't know. I think really in today's society, you have to have that as kind of a contingency scenario or contingency plan. It's not pleasant to think about, but I think it's necessary to think about. So anyway, just kind of my stream of consciousness thoughts on this. I'd love to hear specifically if you're aware of any initiatives, any workshops, especially publicly available videos on the topic of the faith community's response to the economic displacement of AI and how they will respond to that. That's really, I guess I'm going to wrap it all together. That's kind of the bottom line for me. Different from, like I said, Dr. Lee's approach that the faith and the Christian community needs to lean in and be basically an active stakeholder in the development of AI, which I don't disagree with. I think they should, but that's not really addressing the larger issue of societal disruption, kind of frankly an existential crisis. I think a lot of people are going to have when they lose their job, lose their traditional means of income. And again, that's why I think it's almost going to be mandatory that there's some level of universal basic income to maintain a stable society. I mean, as distasteful as that concept seems to people that consider themselves capitalists, I don't know. I don't really know if there's another alternative to it in basically a post-work future. So anyway, I'm interested in any and all thoughts or comments on this. But again, I think this is potentially a big opportunity for communities of faith to really have a very meaningful place in society and in the future, of helping to provide meaning and tangible support for people. Like I said, whether that's economic, community, food, just kind of basic needs for people that they might not otherwise have. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. I could go on. I could babble on for probably another hour about this, but that's kind of my top level kind of thoughts on this. So I'd be curious to hear what any of you else have on this, in terms of thoughts or resources or any links. Love to hear it.